For several years, unregistered churches were tolerated in the People's Republic of China, especially in the bigger cities. But Bob Fu tells us that for Chinese believers in Jesus, meeting together has recently gotten much more difficult.
The urban churches have been really smashed. Even in worship services in their believers' own homes are being raided. Unbelievers, like in early Ren Covenant Church in Chengdu, had been taken away, and while they are having their children's kind of service, while they are having like just a few families together.
Jesus never promised his followers an easy path. In fact, he told his disciples that the world would hate them. He sent them out as sheep among wolves. Jesus' words came true in the life of the apostles, and they're still coming true today in the lives of his followers around the world. Join host Todd Nettleton as we hear their inspiring stories and learn how we can help. Right now on the Voice of the Martyrs Radio Network.
Welcome again to the Voice of the Martyrs Radio. My name is Todd Nettleton. We are connected today via Zoom with Bob Fu. Bob is the founder and the president of the China Aid Association. He's also the author of a book called God's Double Agent. We will talk a little bit more about China Aid. Bob has been our guest before. Bob, welcome back to Voice of the Martyrs Radio.
Thank you, Todd, for having me again. It's always great.
Well, it is very timely. This weekend, the opening ceremonies for the Beijing Winter Olympics. We are going to talk about China. What is it like today to be a Christian in China? And you and I have talked over the years. We know the persecution has changed even in the last couple of years. It has gotten dramatically worse. What is it like today? You just mentioned church leaders who've been arrested just in the last few weeks. What does it mean to follow Christ in China right now?
Yeah, to follow Christ in China right now is like back to the Cultural Revolution time in 1960s. I mean, literally, the Chinese church is going back to the underground church. They have to hide their services. They have to face the physical harassment, physical detention, of course, arbitrary arrest, even from their homes. But also, there's a new feature. That is, the Communist Party has made China enter into a digital authoritarian state. The whole country has been under this face recognition cameras, and Chinese AI technology would follow every citizens. And now, also coupled with the so-called the COVID-19 kind of health dictatorship technology. So every Chinese is obligated, mandated to carry a government app called health app. So whenever you go, that app has to be on. And if you are a Christian, if you have a record of worshiping in the house church, then they could turn from green to red or even to yellow when you buy a train ticket to go somewhere. Then you can't go anywhere. Basically, you are stuck where you are. You became the public health.
And they would say that's all about COVID. They wouldn't say because you're a Christian, because you were at a house church. They would say, oh, no, right. This is a health thing. It has nothing to do with persecution.
That's right. That's what's going on as a Christian in China. I mean, you and I know that, in the past, before President Xi Jinping took power about 10 years ago, I mean, even a couple of years after he took power, there's still some limited freedom for the house church, especially in the urban setting. Some big house church in the cities like Beijing, in Guangzhou, in Shanghai, they're allowed to at least to kind of rent a facility to do some kind of Sunday worship under surveillance. But now that has been totally changed. The urban churches have been really smashed. Even in worship services in their believers' own homes are being raided. Unbelievers, like in early Ren Covenant Church in Chengdu, had been taken away, and while they are having their children's kind of service, while they are having like just a few families together.
I don't think that most Americans can understand the level of control that the Chinese Communist Party wants. That, like, I think it is so foreign to us that it's hard to wrap our minds around. But as you say, they want to control people's movement. They want to control where you can go and who you can talk to and who you can meet with. What is the foundation of that? What drives that desire to control the people so totally?
So what drives the totalitarian political ideology is really President Xi Jinping's desire to make China go back to the Mao era. And he somehow likes the North Korean model. What is the North Korean model? I mean, he basically, in his internal meetings, this is reported that he feels North Korea has done the best job. So the Chinese society should be managed like the North Korean model. So that's how
that's mind-boggling.
That is. I mean, you would think, China, after so-called 40 years opening to the outside world policy, how could the Xi lead this? But he is doing that right now. He's shutting down any decent faith services. I mean, including the government sanctioned churches. If they are allowed to open for limited service, they have to change their preaching, change their doctrine to be so-called syncretized, to be basically totally in line with the communist doctrine first. And all the clergymen, government patriotic pastors, the priests, even Buddhist monks have to first shout, the Xi Jinping is our leader of our church, our temple, and our kind of a sanctuary. And they have to raise the Communist Party's flag, singing the national anthem, being first before they sing the doxology.
It's so mind-boggling to think about that. But that was actually one of my next questions was, when I came to work at VOM 20 plus years ago, the Chinese government line was, well, if all the churches would register, there wouldn't be any persecution. It's not a matter of we're persecuting them because of their faith. We're actually persecuting them because they won't register with the government and they won't follow the rules. But as you've just said, registration is not protection from persecution now. Even a registered church pastor, even a registered church congregation is suffering under this persecution of the Communist Party.
Oh, absolutely. Those registered church pastors, unless you just want to be a Communist Party ideologue, basically follow the political party line speech in your preaching, and then if you are deemed as defined, try to be following the teaching of the Bible and the Lord, then you are going to be from forceful removal to criminal sentence. We have like Pastor Bao Guohua, Pastor Xing Wenxiang. I mean, that's Pastor Bao's wife. They received 14 years and 8-year sentence for imprisonment for refusing to take down the crosses of their church building from Wenzhou. They're still serving that.
And they were serving in a registered church.
They are government-sanctioned, three self-patriotic movement registered churches. Yeah.
Wow. And the other thing that I really want to help people understand is this is coming from Xi Jinping, from the national government. This is another thing. 20 years ago, we would talk about, well, this provincial government is very hard on Christians, but this provincial government is not very hard on them. But now it is from the national level. It is Xi Jinping. It's everywhere in China.
That's right. There's no local differentiation anymore. And there's no regional differentiation like city versus rural, we knew in the past. And now Xi Jinping basically make it very national. And the local government leaders have to act like red guards to purge anything that deemed not communists obedient enough.
How hard is it to get Bibles right now in China?
Right now, I mean, thanks to the Apple App Store, they are forced or complying to the Chinese Communist demand by removing the Bible app, and all other e-commerces cannot be allowed to make Bible apps available. So even the online Bible is totally forbidden. In fact, the Communist Party just passed a new law. It will take effect from March the 1st. It's called the Management of Cyber Religious Materials Regulation. And according to this regulation, even an online prayer service, you have to get a prior authorization from approved, government-approved clergyman. And if anyone does otherwise, you are in violation of the law, and you could be subject for criminal sentence to up to 3 years imprisonment. So this is thus far really the harshest regulation regulating Christian, especially Christian activities.
So even for an online meeting, like even a Zoom meeting or whatever, if you're going to pray or have any kind of religious content in that meeting, you need permission from a provincial level authority. For us, that would be like a state level authority.
Yes.
We're talking today on Voice of the Martyrs Radio with Bob Fu. He is the founder and the president of the China Aid Association. Bob, back in 2008, before the Summer Olympics, I went to China. You actually helped to arrange a meeting for me with a man named Pastor Bike. We called him Pastor Bike because he rode his bike all over China. He was arrested, if I'm remembering correctly, 2 days before the Olympics started in 2008. He was held throughout the Olympics, a few more days after the Olympics, and then let go. And the whole point of it was, we don't want him to talk to the media. We don't want there to be any stories about him. That was 2008. We're now 2022. Have you heard stories like that in the lead up to these games, that people are being detained, people are being moved out of the city, or any other stories of people who are basically being hidden or forced out of sight so that they won't create a problem or a disturbance during the games?
Oh, yes. We already have heard those, some of those so-called sensitive religious personnel, the house church pastors, they are deemed as dangerous to destabilize the Beijing's Winter Olympics. So they are being already detained. Some, like Pastor Dr. Xun Hai, is about to be removed even from his own home. So very foreseeable, he and his wife may be having a forced vacation tour outside Beijing, somewhere in South China. Wow. So that's basically is happening, and many dissidents, many petitioners are already being removed and detained already. So this is for President Xi, this is his showtime. And especially in the middle of the diplomatic boycotts by quite a few Western nations, such as Canada, US, Denmark, Australia, and now Taiwan joined by using this time. So he wants to show, along with Russia President Putin, they're the buddies now, to stand together, basically to do a showcase that his ruling is still strong.
We're talking today on Voice of the Martyrs Radio with Bob Fu. He is the founder and the president of the China Aid Association. Bob, you mentioned a couple of Christians in prison, Pastor Wang Yi, Pastor John Tsao. Are there any updates on how they are doing? Both of them serving long-term prison sentences. Have you heard anything recently about their treatment or their health or how they're doing, or even just specific ways we can pray for them while they're in prison?
Yes, I actually just heard an update about Pastor John Hall. His sister recently met with him through a video in the local Bureau of Justice, because they use COVID-19. to prevent the real face-to-face meeting. And Pastor John Thao's sister printed out version of a booklet. We just published called "Lyrics from Prison." It's in the Amazon, and I think basically we compose and translate quite a few poems we smuggled out from Pastor John Thao's prison. And through the video camera, his sister showed him. He got greatly encouraged. He was just, he said, that's a really, really single encouraging item. And also, I just received another, his new poem that he wrote to his mom, December 21st, 2021. And he said, "Dear Mom, you copied Matthew chapter 24, verse 27 to me. I have memorized them." I mean, these few verses is what Jesus asked his disciples to act, to walk right after they listen to the Lord's words. So he composed these words from Matthew 24, chapter 24, verse 27, with 4-line poems. He said, "Listen to the word of the Lord, immediately make me take the journey. Build the root, the foundation on the rocks, so our faith won't collapse. And no matter how hard the storm strike, to stake to the stable root will gain the mighty power." The root of Christ.
Clearly, the now almost 5 years in prison hasn't dampened his faith and his spirit.
No, not at all.
Bob, what about Pastor Wang Yi? Have you heard any recent updates about him and his situation?
I have not got an update. Primarily, he is also being strictly kind of kept. But we did hear, from his wife and his family member, their faith are really strong, despite of the continuing surveillance and harassment nonstop against his wife and his son Joshua, and the church, Early Rain Covenant Church. So, I mean, as I just mentioned, the Early Rain Covenant Church, they could not even have their own normal Sunday worship service with their own family members every week. They are facing physical beaten up, harassment, and detention all the time. And yet, the church, I heard, has been continuing to show growth. And last year, they even had a number of new believers baptized. Wow. So that is, I think, the dynamics of the unbeatable gospel of Jesus Christ in the middle of the persecution. And pray that, even if they cease the persecution, they can share the gospel to their persecutors, especially the local political security officers. They will also know the gospel really is not the enemy of a Chinese state. It is the political darkness is the enemy. And the Christians are the blessing to that country.
Bob, thank you so much for sharing with us. I always enjoy our conversations, the chance to catch up. Just thank you for your amazing work, being a voice for the Chinese church.
Thank you, Todd, for being a faithful voice for the global persecuted body of Christ all the time. Thank you for your service.
It is my honor. You have been listening to the Voice of the Martyrs Radio. If you're just joining us on broadcast right now, you can find this entire conversation, vomradio.net. We'll give you links there to China Aid. We'll also give you links to the Pray for China campaign. I hope you will sign up. I hope you will pray every day for people like Pastor Wang Yi, people like Pastor John Zhao, and others of our Chinese brothers and sisters, our family who lives in China.